Nah, are you ready to start?
I'm ready.
Alright. How you doing?
It's been a week, but I'm doing good.
Yeah. We just went over this literally an hour ago.
Several bad puns later.
Side note, if you hear barking in the background, that's Himalaya. But getting back on track now. Halloween. How do you feel about Halloween, dude?
I honestly hate it. I'm
All
not
right.
gonna lie.
Okay. Well, let's approach this from three different perspectives here. First, when you were growing up, did you celebrate Halloween? I'm imagining, because again, I wasn't there for most of it, but I was there for the beginning part. Mom and Dad were, yeah. I mean, one, we lived in the middle of nowhere. How are you going to do it? But then two, Mom and Dad were like, no. Why would we do that?
Yeah, never even celebrated anything about Halloween. We really went straight to Christmas.
Yeah, well, Thanksgiving, yeah.
We even skipped Thanksgiving most of the time, unless it was Black Friday.
Yeah, no, I mean, we did Thanksgiving all the time when I was growing up. It was big. It was down at Grandma Cross's house. And it wasn't until all my aunts and uncles and stuff ended up having a bunch of kids and started getting older that it was like, all right, now everybody's got their own Thanksgiving, you know?
Yeah.
But that's why we always, that's
parties.
most of our, games that we would always play, like Mad Gab and anything like that, Apples to Apples, all that was... Thanksgiving was, kind of the best holiday to play all those games, you know?
Yeah.
Plus, everybody would go hunting. Uncle Kinley, 1 year got a turkey. That was a fun one because he got it on Thanksgiving Day. But yeah, we skipped over Halloween too. So I was just making sure that's how the same it was for you when you were growing up.
Yeah, definitely the same.
And now, since then, since you've, been out on your own, what do you do with Halloween now?
I don't like to celebrate it. To be honest, the whole vibes I get around Halloween time just make me very spiritually uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I feel very uneasy about it all. So generally I try to fill my mind with as much godly things as possible during this time.
So do you see, because you're in college, do you see that most of your college friends, I'm imagining they don't view it as a spiritual holiday or anything like that. They just view it as a fun time to party.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's what everybody does at college on Halloween. It's party central.
Yeah.
But I don't really think they take it to any deeper level than that, no.
Yeah. Do you think they think about it at all?
I really don't. I don't, and I think if they do, they don't take it as seriously as they should, whether that's ignorance about it or just not caring, I'm not sure. But I definitely don't think they take it to any deeper levels, really.
Do you see that with both secular kids and kids who are more religious, or do you just see that with the secular kids?
To be honest, I see it with both, because I just joined the young adults group around my local church, and even they all go to the haunted houses and things like that, and for me personally, I just feel very uncomfortable going to those sorts of things. It makes me feel very uneasy.
Yeah. When I was at Summit, they used to do a haunted corn maze. And it was put on by the 3 local churches in conjunction with Summit. Man, I was always weirded out by that too. Having said that, moving on to the third aspect of it, which is the future. What do you think in the future, let's say we flash forward, it's 20 years from now, 15 years from now, what have you. You're married, you have 2 kids, one's 6 and one's 4. They want to dress up for Halloween, they want to go to the trunk or treat that the church is doing. How would you approach that?
It's a very interesting question, and to be honest, it could change by the time I get to that age, but as of right now, I would say there's a way to go about it. I think that going to a church thing like that and having your kids dress up as maybe something innocent like that, I don't think there's really a negative super connotation there with that. I think I would definitely want to give them like a background understanding of like bring Jesus into it somehow, so that way it's not we're dressing up for Halloween and it's fun, but we're doing this and it is fun, but we're also going to bring it back to God in some way, if that makes sense.
No, that makes sense. It's a really good answer. I don't know if it'll change for you in the future, but I mean that's a really good answer. Um, do you, when you see kids, some of Rebecca's friends, who grew up in the church, they felt scorned that they never got to celebrate Halloween as a kid. And so now they go all out and they decorate even more than they would for Christmas or Thanksgiving or Easter or 4th of July. And they'll leave those Halloween decorations up for like 3 months out of the year, and that's their favorite Halloween. That's their favorite holiday. Um, how do you think you would go about approaching people like that? Like, did you? Because again, they're people who are still in the church, but I'm not sure that necessarily we all agree with on that. And I'm not even saying that I do or don't agree. I'm just saying, how do you feel about those people?
I think it's a similar thing. I mean, for me personally, at the time growing up, did wish I could have gone trick-or-treating with my friends. I obviously wanted to do whatever they did. Growing up and looking back now, I'm thankful that I didn't. And it's really just, I think, learning why myself personally, and like why your values are, like why you're doing what you're doing. So if you are doing it maybe out of spite or just because, almost like a rebellion type of thing, I think that's when you need to take a look at your heart posture. But I think if you're doing it just because, you like Halloween and maybe you don't have as much of a spiritual uneasiness about it, I think that everybody's heart's different in that sort of thing, if that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, give me a second. I'm trying to flip over to Romans 14 real quick, because I feel like that's basically where we're at with it all. But I should have had it pulled up already, but I was trying to talk to Rebecca really quickly. All right, let's see what we got here. Yeah, I mean, that's basically what we get out of Romans 14. Especially when you get further down into it. I think it's, you can't do things like, some people are going to come out of, actually we'll get into that in a minute. We'll get into Romans 14 in a minute. We can't get into it right now. No, I know. I quickly regretted getting into it too early. It's too early to get into that one. Here's my next question. Why do you have such a intrinsic negative attitude? Not for lack of a better word, like why do you? What about Halloween makes you uneasy?
Because I think that as humans, we may not take a lot of things spiritually as seriously as we should. Maybe because we just simply don't know that there are things behind that. But I think for Halloween especially, I think it's a very demonic holiday. And I think a lot of things that we celebrate in Halloween have a lot of demonic strongholds. And we can allow ourselves to have a easier access, for lack of better words, to demons, and for them to have an easier access to us by putting ourselves in situations to be around or celebrating those types of things.
So, two things specifically then. What kind of situations and what kind of things do you think put yourself into a situation where you're presenting an easy access?
The first two biggest things that popped right into my mind were, one, horror movies. I think that's super popular around Halloween, and it's something that I've never been able to get into. The second I turn one on, I immediately feel like I shouldn't be watching it. I have to turn it off. I feel very unsettled by it. And then number two is kind of like we said, some of like the Reaper's Revenge or some of those things I feel like just really bring in a lot of demonic energy. and you also just never know who is at those places. I mean, not saying that everybody who works there is demonic, but there's certainly an aspect, I think, for people that like those certain things, and because it's all about like an energy, for lack of better words, that comes with it.
How do you feel about Ouija boards?
I hate them. I think that they are not to be messed with. I think that it's honestly kind of almost sad that a lot of teenagers mostly are the people that mess with it, because I feel like they do it because they think it's fun or because other people are doing it without really understanding the repercussions of what they are messing with and how real it actually is.
What do you think the repercussions are for messing with it? Like, what do you think? Like, what's the negative for it?
I think by talking to spirits, which are demons, I mean, if they're not from God, they're from Satan. So you're talking to demons and allowing yourself to interact with them. And I think by doing that, you are just allowing, sorry, Isaac was going to, but you're just allowing, again.
Did you say monkey?
Like, yeah.
Monkey!
Hey,
Love you, monkey!
love you.
I just imagine it as kind of like, I don't know how to describe it, just more like an easier way for them to talk to you, to be in your life, to have some sort of hold on you.
Do you feel that that's true for both Christians and non-Christians is like alike?
Yes and no. I think especially for, well, actually, yes. I think for people that aren't Christians, I think because they don't have Jesus in their heart, they have a harder time combating those things. And then I think as Christians, we struggle a lot with spiritual warfare and things like that because we are fighting them so hard, in the sense of Satan wants to destroy that good thing inside of us so much that he's willing to do a lot to do it.
Do you think that sometimes things like Ouija boards and things like that can lead to things like spirit or demonic possession, or do you think it
Yes.
just ends with demonic oppression?
I think it can lead to demonic possession. Again, I just think that we don't take it seriously enough, and we don't. I think a lot of people don't really think it's as, not popular, but it happens as much as it does. Like, it's as frequent. I think a lot more people have demons inside of them or attached to them than we think.
No, I agree.
And that can definitely happen through a variety of different things, but I think one of those things definitely could be a Ouija board or whatever you may have it.
What else, off the top of your head, what else do you think leads to it?
Off the top of my head, I would say one of the biggest things I think I've noticed specifically in my own life too is music. I think music has a much bigger influence, maybe not necessarily for being possessed, but definitely at some of those concerts. I mean, if we're really getting into that, I think some of them are performing literal rituals on stages.
Mm-hmm. How much do you know about the origin of Halloween?
To be honest, not very much. Like, I've heard about it, but not enough to tell you about it.
Yeah. What about other countries that have similar holidays? Like Mexico has Day of the Dead, which is November 2nd.
Yeah, I learned about that in my Spanish class, but I'm not gonna lie, I didn't pay super much attention in that class.
Well, Day of the Dead is interesting. Imagine that somebody mixed Halloween with Catholicism. And so basically they have a couple different days that they celebrate. They ring a bell and everybody, and it's from the church, they ring a church bell. And like everybody in their home sets up little altars to their dead relatives with like pictures of their dead relatives, and they have little skulls, and they put out like their dead relatives' favorite food and like some things that they loved, and then they all dress up like skeletons And then at a certain hour, they ring the bell, and you're supposed to be all welcoming in the souls of the dead children. And then, like, the next day is the souls of, like, the dead people, then the dead saints, because it's mixed with Catholicism and a lot of European practices. But that one is even more interesting than Halloween, because now you're literally setting up altars and setting up offerings to these demons. Yeah. Because it's mixed with Aztec tradition. And Aztecs were all about some human sacrifice and some demon worship. Again, I think demons are geographically bound. I think you hear about the Prince of Persia, the Prince of Grecia. I think the one that's in the Gulf Coast, which is mostly, Mexico, from Florida to the Yucatan, but you're talking the Gulf of Mexico. So the Aztec Empire, what is currently Mexico, most of, like, what is New Orleans, Biloxi, all the way down to Miami, Tampa. I think the demon that's here is Quetzalcoatl. And one of his big things that he loves is human sacrifice. But he also loves people engaging in what the Bible calls pharmakia, so drug use. Specifically, things like ayahuasca and peyote and DMT. And I think you enter into a spirit realm where you can communicate with these demons, because most people who do these drugs say that they go and talk to this woman and that they get knowledge from this woman, but there's a bunch of these little demons all around them the whole time that make fun of them and weird stuff like that. But then, like, the Native Americans and the South Native Americans, like the ones from Mexico and even further south, they all have, like, stories of how there was a catastrophic flood, and then they were brought over on boats by these giants, which again would probably be Nephilim if we had to dig deeper into it, and that then they were told that if they wanted to communicate with these giants, they needed to do human sacrifices, but also they needed to take these certain plants, or they needed to eat these certain lizards or frogs or what have you. That way they could communicate with them. And I think it's been going on for a very, very long time. And I think things like Halloween, it can usually coincides with, like, the end of summer. At least when we're talking about the Day of the Dead and we're talking about the South American culture down here. When we get into Europe, that's a whole different discussion, because a lot revolves around the Druids and along Celtic traditions, and then also some stuff that comes out of France and Italy. But even the Chinese have something similar. Everybody, for the most, Russia, on October 31st, all the witches are supposed to meet on Bear Mountain in Russia, and Disney has that in Fantasia. And so, like, it's very interesting that this is celebrated throughout our whole culture and throughout all South America, but I think it all has gone back for a very, very long time, and I think all of it is demonic. Having said that, here's my question. What, again, and we come back to it. Do you take advantage of it, and do you go ahead and tell your kids, like, what it's all about, and let them still do some trick-or-treating, and if it's innocent fun, it's innocent fun, and say that it's just tradition? Which is what you would get out of something out of, like, Romans. Like I said, we're not going to get into it yet. But that's what we'd get out of there. Or do you take it like Deuteronomy says? In Deuteronomy 18, it makes it very, very clear that when you come into a land which the Lord your God has given to you, you shall not learn to follow the abominations of those nations. There shall not be found among you anyone who makes his son or his daughter to pass through the fire, or anyone who practices witchcraft, soothsayery, sorcery, interprets omens, is a wizard, one who conjures spells, a medium, a spiritist, one who calls upon the dead, necromancers, for all these things are abomination to the Lord. So it's like, well, do you let your kid dress up as Harry Potter then?
No, yeah.
Jack's dressing up as Harry Potter this year. What do you do?
Yeah. That's a tough question. I'm not sure.
Yeah. It gets more interesting when you look into the history of it. Halloween was not an American holiday. for the most part, until the late 1800s, early 1900s. That's when Irish Catholics brought it over. As of now, it's like a $10 billion a year industry. It is the most decorated and most celebrated holiday, even higher than Christmas.
I think it's sad. I mean, it's not... I think Satan's had a long time to get this world off of track, and I think he's done a pretty good job at it.
No, I agree. My question is there a delineation and distinction between things that the gospel says specifically you cannot do, and things which some people have written on their heart certain convictions against doing? If that makes sense. Like, for instance, my father-in-law does not eat pork. Now, I can show you verse after verse from the Old and New Testament that support both sides of the argument. But at the end of the day, the verse I come to says, like, if it's a stumbling block for your brother, don't do it in front of him. But even if you go back to Habakkuk, he says the just will live by faith. And we know that you're supposed to live by the law that's written on your heart. But if he comes over, we just don't do pork around him. We're not going to cook pork for him. That's very rude to do. Why would I do that? We're not going to cook pork and eat in front of him. That's rude too. I don't want to be a stumbling block for him, even if I don't necessarily feel the conviction to do that. So my question is Halloween something like that? Depending on your heart, like if you in your heart are not setting out to celebrate Halloween, to celebrate demons, well, and there's one whole other side. We kind of touched on it with partying, but also with girls specifically. In 1 Timothy 2:9, it specifically tells women that they're supposed to adorn themselves modestly,
Don't even get me started on that one.
And so, like, that goes hand in hand with partying. And so, like, if that's the purpose in your heart, is to go out dressed immodestly, or if partying is the purpose in your heart, or if you're really into all of this demonic stuff, this witchcraft wizardry, or the horror and the gore, all that stuff, that's one thing. But what if it's just a little kid? You've got 3 kids. One wants to be a superhero, one wants to be a Jedi, and one wants to be a Bingo Bluey.
Yeah. And I think that's where I think, again, like you said, it's kind of written on your heart, and I think your heart intentions are what God judges you by, and I think only you truly know your heart. So I think I would go based on that.
Well, and what Rebecca loves to point out is that when you die and you go before the great white throne of judgment, you're going to have everything recounted back to you that happened in your life, and God's going to ask you, well, why'd you do this? What were you doing here? What were you thinking here? But you're not going to have your mom or dad, your sisters, your brothers, your friends standing there and be like, well, they told me to do it, and then they're going to convince God for you. It's like, no. He's going to be like, why did you make this decision?
Yeah.
So I feel like you definitely need to be very, very sure of your decisions when it comes to things that are as dangerous as Halloween.
Absolutely.
Again, we haven't really even gotten into the Irish side of Halloween. When you get into the original Druid celebrations of Samhain, who was their god of death, once a year, this is when he would decide, when you died, whether your soul would go into a new human being or into an animal, or whether you'd get to go to heaven. And it was basically their version of reincarnation. It was very similar to Hinduism. But they also worship things like oak trees and hazelnut trees and apples, and even Druid actually means like that they were the priests of the oak. So it's very interesting. They're very heavily tied to the occult, and to a bunch of that stuff that still is around today. The New Age paganism. I don't know how much you know about all that stuff either. But when you come across people who are actual Wiccans and stuff, you start to realize that, oh no, they still take Halloween very. That's for them. It's like a high holiday, you know.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So like
I mean,
it's got some really dark origins, and people still take it very seriously. But I don't think most people take the time to look into it one way or another.
exactly, exactly.
So how do you get them interested? How do you get them into looking into it? Because most people, honestly, they're too busy, or they just don't want to be bothered because they're having a good time.
Yeah, and I think that's the struggle with like telling anybody about God or telling anybody about anything. It's hard to get people's attention these days, especially with how little attention span we do have and how much we need instant dopamine. So by not getting that immediately, if we think we're not going to, we're suddenly not interested. Um, so I that's a tough question. I honestly am not sure.
So then my next thing would be, obviously I've been going through First Timothy here. That's why we started in First Timothy too, with the women. But in First Timothy 4, we come across people who, oh my goodness, if my app would actually load today, it's being about as slow as it could possibly be. We'll get into a story about that in a second too. That's a fun story. But for now, all right, here we go. 1 Timothy 4:1, where it says, "Now the Spirit expressly says that in the latter days some will depart from the faith, giving heed to deceiving spirits and doctrines of demons, speaking lies in hypocrisy, having their own conscience seared with a hot iron, forbidding to marry and commanding to abstain from foods which God created to be received with thanksgiving by those who believe and know the truth. For every creature of God is good, and nothing is to be refused if it's received with thanksgiving, for it is sanctified by the word of prayer." I feel like a lot of people give way to doctrines of demons, especially around the time of Halloween. But at the same time, I feel like, much like it talks about you can't abstain from certain foods, it's kind of more of a conscience thing. So I don't know. I feel like that's where it all leads.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's what I keep coming back to too, is your heart posture.
Yeah. Or like they say in Habakkuk 2:4, the just shall live by faith.
Yeah.
So here's the next thing then. If we can't get them to change their heart posture, how do we make it more, I don't know. A lot of churches do a good job of making it more accessible and creative, and exciting to people. But I feel like a lot of them don't dig back, and there's not a lot of depth there at the same time.
Yeah, I think it even comes back to, like I said, just learning about the origins of it and learning more about it. I feel like a lot of people, again, because we don't have enough attention span, we tend to not dig deep into things and really look into them when we maybe should. And I think that knowledge is power, and with knowledge comes a lot. Like, we can do a lot with that just by informing people more. So once you get them hooked, then the information that you are telling them better be good.
Yeah, that's fair. When it comes to spiritual warfare, I don't know. Actually, let's approach that from a different direction. First. We briefly talked about your experiences with spiritual warfare, but
Yes.
when it comes to demonic warfare, I think we touched on it briefly last time about whether or not you've experienced it before.
Mm-hmm.
But have you talked to any of the other siblings or mom and dad about whether or not they have ever?
I've talked to mom and dad. Dad has not, but mom has. And mom has had similar dreams like I have, actually, which I think is super interesting.
Like which ones?
Like, I've had 2 or 3 dreams, specifically at a point in a time that was a really turning point in my life. where I was really trying to fully follow God. Um, and during that time, my sleep, it was just constantly getting interrupted. And then I would have these horrible nightmares. But the 2 or 3 dreams, the nightmares that I would get, I would encounter demons in them. And I know without a shadow of a doubt that that's exactly what they were. The first time that it happened, it was definitely a little bit scarier to me than the second or third because it just took me a little bit by surprise. The first time it happened, the first thought that kind of went through my head was like, I know that I do have the power through Jesus to overcome this, but at the same time, I also know how much power they have. And I think oftentimes we dismiss their power or think think they have less power than they do. But what I started doing at that time was praying, and then I kind of woke up, and was up for a little bit after that. But the second time it happened, so what I saw in the dream was like a black figure, and in the second dream, I kind of froze for a second and like just stared at it, and then it kind of started slowly moving towards me, and that's when I again just started praying and calling on Jesus' name and just reciting any sort of scripture Bible verse that I could remember at the time. And then again, immediately I woke up and was up for a little bit, immediately tried to dive into my word just to combat it in any way that I could, and then I went back to bed. And then similarly, the third time that it happened, same thing. I just started quoting scripture immediately, started praying, and I woke up.
Wow. That is very, very interesting. I was waiting for the description of it because, yeah, no, I've literally, no, more than a few times I've had the dream. I don't like that dream. Um, it sucks. I hate it. Holy cow. No,
It's
yeah.
like every single thing in your body.
It's why I started watching, it's how I started watching Phineas and Ferb.
Yeah.
I needed something very, very light while I was praying, while I was awake, just to be in the background so that the TV would be on, so that there'd be light in my room.
Yeah.
So I put on Phineas and Ferb quietly while I would sit there and pray until I got tired enough to fall asleep. That's wild. Having said that, there's other guys like Hal Lindsey, um, who have experienced things where they wake up and they're floating a foot above their bed.
Yeah.
And that shakes them quite a bit. I know there's quite a few people who have experienced stuff like that. But man, that's weird that you gave that description. It makes me wonder.
I don't think it's any coincidence.
No, it really does make me wonder because I had that like it's been less than a month since I've had one of those.
Yeah, it's a crazy feeling for sure.
No, and I'm lucky because I have Rebecca. Like again, I don't wake her up because I don't want to freak her out. But it is very, very reassuring to know that I have somebody there, dude.
Yeah.
Because what it used to happen when I was in the army, I hated it when I was in the army because I was by myself.
Yeah. I mean, I think even dreams just have something that I've always been attacked in. I've had nightmares for literally as long as I can remember. I would go down to mom and dad's room every single night till I was like 12 years old.
Must have been nice. You were the only one allowed in, Nat.
I was a girl.
Yeah. Listen, if I got down on the couch, I was going to get yelled at.
Yeah. I know. And mom and dad would always come out and sit with me till I fall asleep too.
Must have been nice. Having said,
I get so scared. They were so bad.
Yeah, I've had them my whole life too. They're terrible. And so I can't sleep now because one, I have severe obstructive sleep apnea, so like I can't breathe in the middle of the night, and I just stop breathing, and so like I wake up a bunch. But on top of that, because of other stuff that's going on, I wake up every single morning at 3. Period. And I wake up drenched in sweat. There's no going back to sleep, and I need to go throw up instantaneously. 3 o'clock in the morning, every morning, no matter what. And it's terrible. I've tried not eating. I've tried eating. I've tried going to sleep early. I've tried going to sleep late. Doesn't matter. Yeah, I'm gonna wake up at 3. I'm gonna throw up. And but between when I go to bed and 3 a.m., I'll have probably 20 to 30 dreams in a night, and they'll all be nightmares, to the point where I'm exhausted when I wake up, and it's hard for me to keep track of what's real and what's not.
Do you have reoccurring nightmares?
Yeah, I go to the same town. I've renamed my town because it is a weird place. It's a hybrid of a college campus and a military base, and I go there all the time, and it's bad. I don't like being there, but I'm there all the time.
I always say that my dreams are like a Netflix series that I just keep going back into.
Yeah, and what's weird is like, oh man, your guys are always there. The last one was Izzy. Izzy was in the last one big time, but usually all of you guys are there.
Oh, dreams are crazy.
Yeah, no, but again, the Bible kind of says that that's how it works.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at dreams in the Bible, that's kind of how it works. And if you look at spiritual warfare, that's kind of how it works. Rebecca is finally here. Oh, thank goodness. Rebecca, you have missed some interesting conversation.
You have missed several episodes of Winnie the Pooh.
I did miss several episodes of Winnie the Pooh. I am sad about that. Well, because here's the problem. Pooh's not a train robber, and Tigger's not a... Pooh's not a train robber.
Oh, Winnie the Pooh.
Rebecca, it's your time to chime in briefly, if you could, with your thoughts on, I'll let you take either one, your thoughts on Halloween, the good, the bad, the ugly. Or you can take on spiritual warfare, demons. What do they look like?
I'll take the second one just because the first topic is such
a loaded question.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't fall for those.
Take the second one.
So, me personally, what spiritual warfare looked like?
Oh, no.
No.
I phrased my question specific. Demons. What do they look like?
Oh, demons. What do they look like?
Oh, yeah. Have you... Well, let's back one step up. Do you think you've encountered demons?
I wouldn't say that, like, encountered so much as, like, maybe experienced oppression from.
That's fair.
But I do know, I had a youth group leader growing up who talked a lot about her brother who, had been possessed, and she was, like, there when he had, like, when they casted the demon out of him and everything, and when he became a Christian, and, you know, was able to have conversations with him later on about what experiences he went through during that time. And he had a lot of different descriptions of what they looked like, and most of which they would take on objects in his room. And it's kind of was interesting because it's almost like, if you want to tie it into the media and such, especially things like Toy Story. Sorry to ruin that for you guys, but that was, I remember, like, something he couldn't watch because it felt too much like what he experienced growing up.
That's very interesting.
Okay. Well, another thing I'd like to point out. I don't know if you guys know who Susan Atkins is.
No.
I'll show you a picture of Susan Atkins when she was arrested, Rebecca.
Yeah, so that looks a little...
She was demonic possessed when she was arrested.
Yeah.
She was tied in with Charlie Atkins. He was a mass murderer, so on and so forth. However, she became a Christian while she was in jail. She listened to Chuck Missler. She requested to meet Chuck Missler one time. And when he met her, I'm trying to see if I can find a picture of her by then, but night and day difference. It was very obvious in her whole entire everything about her demeanor and her face and her look that she was no longer demon possessed in any way, shape, or form. And she wrote a book called Child of Satan, Child of God, because she was a Satanist. And one of the big things that she did was demon worship, especially around the time of Halloween was their biggest time of the year that they would do stuff, and that's when they committed a lot of their murders.
I think it's important to note that, like, it can definitely be portrayed. It's not necessarily what, like, you know, not necessarily media, but, like, culture, I guess, would depict them as like these, you know, scary looking ghouls, essentially, that are, like, trying to sneak up and get you. They can definitely take on the appearance of anything, and, I mean, Satan himself was known to be the most beautiful of all the angels. I'm not saying that they still look like angels, but I wouldn't be surprised if they have abilities to change into whatever appearance they want to take on.
Do you think that includes people who see aliens or ghosts or things like that?
I think it's all demons.
Yeah, but you think that that's them taking on that appearance?
Yes. To manipulate us, especially. Demons are very smart and crafty. They know us very well. They are able to use anything that we deem acceptable to try and worm their way into our world.
That was a really great way to put it. I loved that.
Do you guys know where the word Ouija board comes from?
I don't know where it comes from. I just
It's
know
two
to
words.
stay away.
It's two words put together. Oui, French for yes,
Mm-hmm.
and ja, German for yes.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just yes or yes. There is no yes or no, because that's how you get demons to come in if you use it.
Well, yeah, you have to be almost accepting and inviting of
Yeah, it's
them
kind of like a
into your
vampire. You
life.
have to invite them into your house.
Well, yeah, that's why we have these ridiculous different
And I think drugs work that way.
traditions.
And I
and
think
such.
that's why you said, Lucifer's very good looking.
Mm-hmm.
Most beautiful of all the angels.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said earlier, you weren't here for it, but in the DMT spirit realm, they always say that whoever does these drugs, they always say they go talk to this very beautiful, very intelligent woman.
Mm-hmm.
And when you read Revelation, you see that there's this woman who is wickedness. And she's carried away in an ephod by two storks, which are unclean birds.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, we've talked several times about all of the different, especially Nephilim and everything when you get that involved with it. Like, they were able to have even more of an impact on our world when they had that included with it, because they were almost like another source of.
Well, and they're still around by the time you get to David. There's still Nephilim then.
Yeah.
And so it's like, okay, well, if we have Nephilim in the time of David, then yeah, they're probably all over the world by this point.
Mm-hmm.
Because not most people, a small subset of people think that Solomon was able to sail to America, and people have tested whether or not it would be possible using Egyptian reed ships that they had at that time. Some dude in 1900s, like 1907, 1917, tried. He failed the first time, but then he tried again, and he succeeded the second time. So he sailed from Egypt to America in a Egyptian reed ship made of nothing but what they would have had. And so people say that Solomon could have traded with America back then. But having said that, we know that there's Nephilim already in that time. So there's probably Nephilim in America at that time as well. Because that's what all their legends say. And all the legends speak of floods. And all of them say that they were brought there by Nephilim in boats.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Bible clearly says that there will be Nephilim in those days, and then also after that. And then in the New Testament, it says that as it was in the days of Noah, so will the end times be. And so you'll have Nephilim in the end times as well. So I think they're more than ready to come back, and I think things like Avengers are priming that for everybody. They'll all be super excited to see Nephilim show up because they'll be like, oh, the Avengers are finally here. And Thanos is going again. Oh no, now I'm being your dad and doing that thing. Well.
I didn't walk you into that one, I promise.
Well.
Did we lose Natalie?
No, that's just, I'm just taking it all in. It's all very interesting to me.
You can go pretty deep into the weeds when you start pulling all of that into it, but I do think that they definitely have, they increase their influence in our world, just being able to communicate with us even more so through that way.
And I think drugs is one way. I think Ouija boards is another way. I think people who do tarot card readings is another way. We had a girl who came to the barracks one time because she was dating one of the boys, and she was a Wiccan, and she brought tarot cards, and she did a reading in one of the rooms, and I wasn't there for it, but she had never been in there before, knew nothing about the history of the room, but her tarot cards told her that the last kid in that room had killed himself. And the last kid in that room had, in fact, killed himself about a year earlier.
I mean, yeah, they are giving correct information.
Oh, yeah. They have power. It's spooky. You gotta stay away from it.
See, and that's where I'm like, it's hard because you want to equip yourself with the knowledge about them, so you're aware and so you can fight back. But it's also hard because you don't necessarily want to super dig deep into it, because then by digging, I feel like you're also...
Oh, no, you do want to dig deep into it. You just want to do it with prayer.
And you want to do it in the right way as well.
Very carefully with prayer. Because it's also dangerous. Because Chuck Missler's son, when he was digging deep into demonology, his 30-year-old son just randomly died while he was out jogging. Very healthy guy, just randomly died. And it's like, all right, well, all right. You got to do it very carefully with prayer, and you got to be willing to take the lumps when they come too.
Right, and that's what I think I'm saying, where it's like, yes, you absolutely do want to dive deep into it, but make sure you're doing it carefully.
Oh, yeah. And also realize that you're going to get hit even harder if you start looking into it.
Absolutely. And that's what I was going to say, is make sure you're not underestimating them.
Oh, yeah, no. And that's
know that you do have power through Jesus, but like we talked about in the last episode.
Yeah, only through Jesus.
Right, because, I mean, he said, I don't know you, and I just don't want that to happen.
Exactly, dude. And again, so that's the advantage to these dreams, is like, clearly, okay, when you're a child of Christ, as long as you use his name, you're good. You just don't want to cross that line and start calling things out, you know?
Right.
But at the same time, we have all the power he had. And his disciples were able to cast out demons. And so I think it's also a faith thing and your heart thing at the same time. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you remember were you too young to have ever gone to Grace Fellowship in Tunkhannock?
Yes.
All right. Yes. Grace Fellowship in Tunkhannock had a great pastor, Harry Shork. And Harry Shork, the first week he was a Christian, he was super on fire for Christ because he was a former drug addict. And he was from Jersey, and he was a short guy. He was hilarious, very, very charismatic. Loved Harry Short, great pastor. Great, his knowledge of the word was incredible. But his first week, he was on fire for Christ. He's just spreading the word to everybody he knows, all his friends at work, anything he can do, everywhere he goes. And he has a night when he's laying in bed, and he's completely paralyzed, and he can't move. He doesn't know if he was asleep and dreaming it, or if he was awake and saw it. But he also had a demon at the foot of his bed, and it just sat there, and it just laughed at him, and just made him feel powerless and weak, and it laughed and laughed and laughed, and he did the same thing. He just started quoting the Bible back to this demon.
Well, I think that's really important to do, too, because, I mean, if you look at what Jesus did when Satan had tempted him, quoted Scripture.
Yeah, I think that's I think that's the only thing you can do.
Well, those are the Father's words, so why wouldn't you use his words back, instead of coming up with your own?
Well, that's even what Michael said. Michael said, the Lord rebuke you. Get behind me, Satan.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and it's also, we have the armor of God, and a lot of them are defenses, but the one offensive is the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God, the living word.
Mm-hmm. Well, and what's your shield? That shield of faith.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you gotta have that helmet of salvation, or you're not gonna be able to have any of it. But specifically, the shield of faith is how you quench the fiery arrows of the evil one.
Yeah.
And I think that's demonic warfare,
Absolutely.
And it, like I said, eventually we're going to go into a longer one on spiritual warfare specifically. But I just wanted to do a brief one on Halloween because I felt like it needed to be addressed. And I feel like we're going to get enough good stuff out of this one that I don't think people think about. And again, we didn't even have to get too deep into the weeds about Celtic traditions, other European traditions, other origins of things like the jack-o'-lantern and things like that. We didn't even get to bonfires on the hill, why they trick or treat, the masks, the fact that they would put out food for the dead in Ireland, all that stuff. But
I don't know if you mentioned this earlier. One of the more interesting side, like farmers have now created this like income that they receive every year because of Halloween, because they grow pumpkins, and this is like a huge part of now what they produce every year. And like
pumpkins and corn.
Pumpkins and corn, because people want to go to corn mazes, and people want to buy pumpkins not just for decor but also for jack-o'-lanterns. And like the prices of pumpkins and like the entire pumpkin industry just like skyrocketed just because of this holiday. And like I think just like even then you have the candy business, the costume business, like the entire
The alcohol,
the alcohol business, like every one of them all like just all skyrocketed from this simple holiday. Even
Target now sells Ouija boards.
Even the school systems have now been like told to promote this holiday even more so. Like, it's the entire month of October that they spend talking about this one holiday. And it's like really has like taken on a new life of itself. And I don't think that's like by any circumstance. I'm sure that is partly because it does draw people away from God, despite so many people's good intentions of trying to turn it elsewhere.
Well, I think it provides an easy access for demons.
Yes. It's like Nephilim.
Well, yeah, it's literally probably their favorite holiday because, like, everybody, no matter what you're getting into, the odds of you dabbling into something you shouldn't on this specific holiday, even if it's something as seemingly innocent as just gluttony, you're still dabbling into a lot of stuff here.
Yeah.
But at the same time, is it wrong to take your kids out? Is it wrong to go trunk or treating? Is it wrong to, like, next year our plan is to dress Real Deal up as a centurion because his name is Cornelius, so it'd be hilarious because he's the first Christian convert then. And we're going to dress Esther up as Esther because why not? That's awesome too. And so, like, yeah, but also one of the things that we do every single year is we hand out stuff for our church along with handing out candy. And I think that goes a long way too. And I think it goes a long way to meeting your community and getting out and to meeting the people that are around you, putting names to faces and letting them know that what you do here and so on and so forth.
We've even had a couple of repeaters. Like I met this last year, we had a couple of people who were like, "You did this last year, didn't you?" So it's like, the more you do it, the more you're part of the community to even like.
You can be a little bit of salt and light in a dark place, perhaps. But at the same time, if it causes somebody to stumble, I can see why you wouldn't do it.
Yeah. Absolutely, I get it.
Thoughts, Rebecca?
No, I'm good.
You're so silly. You were only here for like 10 minutes of this.
I was rocking a baby.
I know. You and your rocking your baby.
Some good stuff, though. She came in ready to roll.
I know. She always does.
I do what I can.
I prefer when she's here because then I don't have to fill all the,
And he feels like he doesn't talk too much.
Yeah.
Somebody's here to referee him.
Yeah, because otherwise I feel like a monologue.
Nat, did you not referee him properly?
No, Nat got to talk. We got some good stuff out. But I definitely did talk too much too. But we got a lot of good stuff out of Nat. Like I said, I think if you're taking your kids out because you have little kids, and I think the other important thing, like you said earlier, Nat, is to explain it to them.
Yeah.
So they don't accidentally do something.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
There's no reason to try to pretend to shelter them from it. That's God's job.
All right, and I think it's important to also, again, tell them that, and then because then you can also keep building on the information as they get older.
Yeah, I mean, it's
You're
like
setting
math.
that foundation.
It's like math. You teach them addition and subtraction first. You're not going to teach them calculus right off the bat.
Exactly.
Now, having said that, Halloween. All right, I think we've wrapped up most of our Halloween stuff. I think we've wrapped up most of our surface level spiritual warfare stuff.
Eventually.
Well, I'm trying to make sure we didn't leave anything out that I wanted to touch on. Oh, how do you feel about Christians who say things to the effect of, no real Christian would celebrate Halloween? Or, to put it another way, asking a Christian to celebrate Halloween is like asking a Holocaust survivor to celebrate Hitler's birthday.
I think that, like we said already, each person is judged on their heart, and God is the only one that truly knows somebody's heart. So I think to say all Christians is just kind of...
Oh, no, I wasn't asking your opinion on the statement. I was asking your opinion on the people who say that statement.
Again, everybody's, I would say the same thing, everybody's judged on their own hearts, so I think for them to say that is maybe them trying to do the Lord's work that is just not necessarily for them to do. I think when we start to say things like that, it almost causes like a divide, I guess, in a place where it's like, don't put the plank out of somebody else's eye if there's one in yours. I think that every sin is the same, so whether somebody might be struggling with Halloween or maybe not knowing about it or something else completely different, they're still struggling regardless. I don't think that really answered your question, but that's all I got.
It does answer most of it. But the only thing it doesn't answer is the delicate way to approach people like that. To try to show them, like, maybe there's two sides to this story, Maybe there's a way to do it where you're just doing it for either outreach purposes or cultural purposes, not just secular purposes.
Yes.
But I think you kind of did hit the nail on the head.
Oh, okay, good.
Rebecca?
I think the speaker that your mom was sending you, I can't remember what.
Oh, I like that guy.
Yeah, I can't. Did you get a couple videos from your mom, Natalie? I don't remember what his name was, but one of the videos specifically he talked about was Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in a way you can apply the same, because, like, again, sin is sin in God's eyes. Obviously, yes, there is a need to be a little bit more cautious around Halloween because it does...
Time out. Do you see how many chickens I have to scroll past that my mom sent me? These chicken pictures. She spammed me the other night, and so I have to scroll past...
That's because you spammed her.
I have to scroll past...
So, buddy.
I have to scroll past 60 chicken pictures to try to get to these videos to find this dude's name.
That's so funny.
Do you not know about the spamming chicken pictures to each other?
Oh, I know, and I know how long it's been going on.
Oh, a long time.
You guys are still doing
Cliff.
that?
Yes. Oh, yeah, we still do it.
There's
Cliff
like
Connect.
Long breaks in between.
Cliff Neck. Cliff Neck? Yeah, you know Cliff.
Yeah.
Tall, skinny dude.
Everybody knows Cliff.
Yeah,
Okay.
tall, skinny dude, yeah.
So, because again, like, yeah, sin is... Okay, so backtracking. So, sin is sin in God's eyes. And, obviously, yes, we need to be a bit more cautious around Halloween because we are a bit more susceptible, especially when it comes to the spiritual warfare side of things and demons and such of that nature. However, at the end of the day, these holidays do all take from certain cultures and such that are pagan cultures and everything. So in my eyes, if you're going to celebrate Christmas, I don't see why you're not celebrating Halloween.
Same thing with Easter.
Especially if all you're
Same thing with Easter.
especially, yeah, in Easter. Especially if what you're celebrating is around your kids,
And your family.
celebrated
And
around your
God.
family, still celebrated with some sort of God connection to it, or even then also, even celebrating it at your church, doing church events and church functions and
I
such
didn't
in this
tell her about
nature.
the play.
Oh
That's
yeah,
another good option too.
Yes. Sorry,
If
now
you
I'm trying
wanted
to
to
remember
celebrate
back
an
where I was
event
going.
at your church event, so you could always do something different instead of doing
Oh
Halloween.
yes.
You could put on a play of Saul and the Witch of Endor.
Yes.
That's great to do this time of year.
Yes, but specifically going back to the speaker you had mentioned, I can't remember what you said his name was, Cliff. What he had said, that like, I think somebody was trying to stump him in the video and was trying to ask him, if he was going to be celebrating Christmas and such, and it was like
because of Saturnalia and so on.
yeah,
and so
and he's like, "Are you mean that I'm going to participate in this country's tradition and, spend time with my grandchildren and put smiles on their faces by
And
giving
tell them
them
about
gifts
Jesus.
and to still sit there and tell them about Jesus and tell them about, him coming down for them and everything?" Then, like, yes, absolutely, I plan on celebrating Christmas at Christmas time and, like, even try to still stump him with, but that's not when he was born and everything. And it's like, yes, and the pilgrims didn't come at Thanksgiving time either. And like, like other different traditions weren't technically done at this specific time, but yet like it's a part of your culture and it's a part of this, especially even like, this country's culture. And
especially if you're willing to at least acknowledge that, yes, there is things about this that you should avoid.
yes, and like, you're honest with your children about that and you make sure to incorporate Jesus still into things, then I don't see the problem with it. That's all I have to say. I don't know if that answered. That's what I would say back to the person who said that.
Yeah, I would say that in essentials there should be unity, in non-essentials there should be liberty.
Yes. But in all things, agape.
All right. Have we accomplished everything? Is this our goal?
You're the one with the questions, man.
I know, but I think we got them all.
Before we end the call, I do have one more question.
There are no more questions. What do you have?
I was talking to somebody the other day about God and stuff like that, and they tried to bring up, like, a discrepancy in the Bible about how it's not actually an apple and how it was meant to be evil and how can we trust a book and that's been translated and all of these other things.
Oh, that's fun. Go ahead.
And to be honest, I mean, he really didn't want to have a full conversation about it because he was really just trying to make his point.
Yeah.
But if I did sit down and have an actual conversation, what would be the best ways to go about that?
So, first and foremost, you do your own research. The best place I'd start for research is a book or is a teaching called How We Got Our Bible by Chuck Missler. It's dry as boring can be if you hate old, boring guys from back then. But it's incredibly valuable. How We Got Our Bible is a very, 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 very good teaching. It talks about the Council of Nicaea. It talks about the Council of Trent. It talks about when the Jews rewrote their Bible. It talks about when the Catholics rewrote theirs. It talked about why the book of Enoch is not in our Bible and why the book of Timothy is not in our Bible, Thomas is not in our Bible, and why we don't have 1st and 2nd Maccabee in our Bible. And it talks about why different religions, different versions of our religion have different Bible books in there. But it also goes into the Dead Sea Scrolls. And the Dead Sea Scrolls, Rebecca and I have seen the book of Esther in the Dead Sea Scrolls, and it matches word for word. Same thing as Isaiah, word for word for what we have now, manuscript-wise. We have in the Museum of the Bible in D.C., there is a fragment from Matthew that was written originally from Matthew on a codice. So it was written within 20 years of Christ walking the earth. And that is wild that we still have that. And it word for word still matches. My favorite version of the Bible, obviously I love using the New King James because people are familiar with it, but the International Standard Version is based on the Dead Sea Scrolls. and it's the most accurate version there is. The King James Version, the advantage is we know its weaknesses. We know where it mistranslated words. And I pointed those out earlier in our other one about Genesis, when I pointed out that it could be better translated, but the earth had become. As far as it being an apple, it was not an apple. It was just a fruit. It wasn't meant to represent evil. It's the knowledge of good and evil. And once you take a bite of it, if you take a bite of the tree of life, you live forever. And then you have the knowledge of good and evil. And so, like, that is a weird thing. And it's hard to understand because it is a fruit, but it's also more than a fruit. But a more important thing to point out is that Eve ate it because she was tricked by Satan. But Adam ate it and was not tricked by Satan. He ate it because he knew that because Eve ate it, she now has to die. He didn't want to live his life without Eve. So he took a bite of it too, knowing that then God would either have to save them both or kill them both. And Jude points that out. And Jude points it out, and Paul points it out, that Adam was not deceived. But he did it anyway.
I wanted to make a point real quick.
But the big thing is I would point out is that there's a ton of resources out there, but the Bible, when you look at the King James Version, we know what is inaccurate about it, and it makes it a lot easier to work with.
There's also by Chuck Missler, if you want to spend the time to like really dig into it, there is Learn the Bible in 24 Hours, and it is obviously 24 1-hour sessions that you listen to, and he
Gives you a
actually
brief overview of everything.
gives you basically a brief overview of the entire Bible throughout that whole thing. And that would be like even just a good, while you're working out at the gym or while you're whatever, driving back and forth from college and home.
But he gets into the weeds about it. Hey, there's another guy that gets really into the weeds a lot. And actually, I was just watching him earlier today. Because you know Jordan Peterson, yeah. Everybody knows Jordan Peterson. Jordan Peterson, love him or hate him, I don't really feel one way or another about him. But he just had a conversation like a couple months ago with a guy named John Lennox. And I think I talked about John Lennox last time. That dude is brilliant. Triple doctorate from Oxford, Cambridge, and Harvard. And one of his big things is what he wrote a book called The 6 Days That Divide the World. And in it, he goes into, like, how do we know what the Bible is true and what the Bible meant and so on and so forth. Especially when it talks about the word day and, like, in the day something was created, so on and so forth. But, like, as far as saying translations of the Bible are inaccurate, to be honest, the King James, the New King James, and the International Standard Version, they do have some faults, but they're well documented. As far as why we don't accept the Book of Enoch, it contradicts itself. If you read it one time, it quickly realizes that it contradicts itself because it does not ascribe the origin of evil to Satan, but a group of angels, and there's a bunch of other stuff. It reads like rabbinical fan fiction more than anything. Like, it's their commentary on probably what would have happened. And it's not that good. When you read, like, the Book of Thomas or Tishri, or you read, at least I think that's what it's called, and then you have Maccabees, 1st and 2nd Maccabees. They clearly are like historical books, but they're not God-inspired books, and they contradict other things in the Bible. The advantage to the canonical books that we have is that they never contradict themselves, and if you do find a contradiction, you should get super happy and rejoice because you're probably about to find something very, very interesting. And people love to point out different verses, like Adventures in Odyssey used to point out there's a verse that says, it's better that a man should not, if he's not married, he should remain unmarried. But then there's another verse that says, he who finds a wife finds a good thing and gains favor in the eyes of the Lord. And so it's like, one says, answer a fool according to his folly. And the other one says, do not answer a fool according to his folly. So it's like, you could try to find contradictions in the Bible. You can even try to find, like, oh no, this word was true.
Context is a big part.
Yes, but you can also try to find where there is incorrections and there's errors in how the way it was translated. A lot of that has to do with some of the what were they called? Were they Nicaeans? Perhaps. There was these two guys who they denied the deity of Christ, and they were translating the Bible, and they were very good at translating the Bible, except they denied the deity of Christ, and they tried to mess some stuff up too. But long story short, you can spend hours and hours and hours digging into it, and at the end of the day, you'll come away with the conclusion that there are some errors, but they're well documented. And what we have, we fully understand. But the advantage is what we have is not a picture, where if you pull out a part of it, we no longer see what it is. What we have is a hologram. It's a 3D projection, and even if you pull out a part of it, you can still see it. But much like a hologram can only be illuminated by the laser that created it. And so, like, you have to be able to, any other thing, you're going to get a false image. And so that's kind of how it works. If you read the Bible through any other lens than the one that created it, you're going to get a false image. And at the same time, you can try to go ahead and pull things out of it, and it's still going to give us a complete enough image. We know that we're missing books of the Bible. We know that there's one more letter to the Corinthians that we don't have, that it mentions. So we still get a full picture, though. Like they say, the way the gospel works is that it is sprinkled line upon line, here a little, there a little, precept by precept. You know?
Yeah, no, that definitely answers my question.
I would also say, though, too, a lot of people who come about you, like, who are going to approach you in that manner and who are specifically there to trip you up, this might sound a little, like, silly and out there, but, like, realize it is also a form of spiritual warfare. That is because, like, as you very quickly, I'm sure, realized by this person, they weren't going to be willing to actually sit down and have a conversation with you. They were probably just sitting there trying to trip you up and trying to make you feel foolish, or, like, you know.
Oh, exactly.
And like this is, like, happens all the time, and, like, again, like I said, it's very easy to just go ahead and, like, this is obviously just an attack, and this is obviously just somebody who is just being used to facilitate an attack.
But also, that's why you always got to be in the Word, learning all this stuff, so that you're always ready to teach and correct and rebuke and instruct.
Yep, absolutely. I think you guys answered my question perfect.
All right, Nana, get some sleep.
Hey, I love you guys. Thanks.
Love you, Nat.
Love you, Nat.